Welcome to the Inspire Collective podcast, where our goal is to inspire Christian men and women in the marketplace with all they need to positively influence those for God's kingdom. My name is Chris Bowen, and today we're sitting down with Advocates for Africa founder Jerod Smith. Jerod and his wife Katina have a passion for serving Africa, which they have done for more than 20 years. Since 2014, they have ran Advocates for Africa, a nonprofit dedicated to raising funds and awareness for the African population. Today, we'll discuss his organization, the obstacles that they have overcome, and how listeners can aid them in their service. So let's get started. Jerod, it is a delight and a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Man, it's my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I know it's going to be a great interview today. We have some great guests that come on, and of course, yours is very unique than anything that we've had to this point. So before we actually get into your organization, let's discuss your backstory for just the viewers so they understand you a little bit better. Can you tell us about the time that you and your wife spent in Rwanda?
Yeah, absolutely. So we moved to Rwanda in 2006, but back then, there weren't a lot of facilities back then. In America, 12 or 13 years goes by pretty fast. We forget what happened in the past. But in Africa, 12 years isn't really that long of a time. And when the genocide of Rwanda happened in 1994, when we came there in 2006, it really just felt like just a few years afterwards. And so what we saw was that there were a lot of dirt roads. There were hardly any paved roads. There was maybe 4 or 5 paved roads. The electricity, the water was real spotty in and out. But, for us, Dr. Bowen, it was really eye-opening because there were moments where we could be in the local market, for example, and we would hear people shouting and clapping and hugging. And, we would grab someone that was nearby and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And it would be a group of people that hadn't seen each other since the genocide, and they had lost touch with each other. And so at that meeting, of course, they were obviously very excited to see one another. But it was tough those first couple of years. My wife and I sold everything that we owned in order to make that trip. So that combined with some very faithful donors, it was very eye-opening. But one of the things that we noticed when we first went there was that the Rwandan people are so gracious, they're so loving, and they're so capable. They're very capable of doing the work of the ministry. And so we worked alongside them, for 3 straight years, and it was wonderful.
That's awesome. We appreciate that sacrifice too. I know it's not just a sacrifice for you, but the entire family to make that kind of dedication. So what were some of the common recurring issues that you saw during your time there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when my wife, Katina, by the way, we've been married 28 years, and she's still my best friend after 28 years. When we first went there, one of the things that we noticed right away was, as I was mentioning, is that the Rwandan people were very capable of doing the work of the ministry. The thing that they lacked in many places were funding, a little bit of strategy, and some accountability and leadership structure. And so we just began to develop a team of people that could do the work of the ministry, and then we would apply what we could, as we could. And the ministry began to grow right away, and we really have just never looked back since then, to be honest with you. It's that first 3 years there living on the ground in Rwanda was an incredible time. The people that we work with there, our team is just incredible. And so it's a different Rwanda today than when we first went there, but it definitely, the seeds of that from the beginning were something that put us into the place that we are today.
Yeah. So you said that the time is actually different for what we know as 10, 12 years here versus there. So how were you serving the people in Rwanda back then versus how you're able to do that now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we first got there, I'm an evangelist by call. Mm-hmm. And so when we arrived there, were just planning on doing evangelistic outreaches and things like that. And so we would go into the Muslim markets, for example, and our team would set up the sound system. And when it was time to preach, I would come out and I would preach in these Muslim markets. And so many people would gather around because here's this guy that is not the normal guy that they're used to seeing. And we would preach in those Muslim markets, and so many people would give their lives to Christ that during the transition time, we would play music again. And of course, more people are coming in and out of the market. So the crowd would grow again. And so we would have to preach again. And so some of these outreaches would go on for hours because we would just keep doing worship music and then preach. People would get saved. More people would come. And it just kept going over and over and over. But that really began to spur other thoughts from us as we got more comfortable with what was going on in Rwanda and saw more of the needs. So we began other outreaches to where we were helping people to start businesses and to pull themselves out of poverty. It's one of the things that we see in Africa that's so different than America. Here we have poverty. What we have in Africa is extreme poverty. Wow. And so we just began to work in areas doing food outreach programs, working in the refugee camps, evangelistic meetings, and then helping people create businesses in order to provide an income for themselves and for their families.
Wow. So 8 years ago, back in 2014, you put a formal name to the work that you were doing that we know now as Advocates for Africa. Was this a challenge to get up off the ground, to actually get this Advocates for Africa off the ground?
Oh man, was it? Yeah. It was a really good question, huh? Yeah, it was a big challenge. We come out of a fellowship that has a very traditional mindset of missionaries. And Katina and I were very traditional frontline missionaries for that first 3 years. But the things that we saw in Rwanda, we just felt like that God had a different plan for us and a different way to do things. And so when we launched the ministry, way back then, we served that first 3 years. And as you said, 2014, we put a name on it. And it was January of 2014, my wife and I were in a fast, and God spoke to us about doing that. And we were pastoring at the time. Actually, our work in Rwanda was still going on, but we had come home for a little bit of a break, which I say that funny because we came home to take a break and pastored a church. It tells you how naive.
Anybody that's pastored knows that's not much of a break.
It wasn't much of a break, but it was different, and it was good for us to be back in America for a while. But the truth is, we just couldn't shake this feeling of needing to be involved at a deeper level in Africa. And so during this fast, God spoke to us, and we put a name to the work that we really had been doing for a while, and we called it Advocates for Africa. But when we stepped away from the church, it was a decent sized church, and we left a great income or no income. So when we left the church, we had 7 speaking engagements booked. And that first year, I think we barely raised $30,000. Wow. I was working side jobs. I was doing private investigation work. I have a military background, so it kind of lent itself to that really well. I was repossessing cars for a company at night. So I was working all night, working all day. My wife was working full time at that time, not in the ministry. So we barely raised enough money just to eat that first year. But God is faithful. He just began to grow the ministry, and it was hard at first, but we knew that God had spoken to us. Right. And so we just kept moving forward, and then eventually things started to grow. More people caught on to the vision of what we are doing, which is bringing hope, compassion, and education to the continent of Africa. And as more people came along, the ministry started to grow, and then it was able to pay me full time, and then I was able to bring Katina on full time. And really, it was a necessity because the ministry was just growing so quickly.
Wow. And so you went from $30,000 a year and raising that first year, and now through your organization, you're responsible for raising millions of dollars for the missions and the well-being projects throughout Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about all that AFA is actually doing? Because I know you guys got a major work going on. So tell our viewers and our listeners today exactly what all you guys are doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, we work in 3 primary areas. Our buckets, if you will, are evangelism, compassion, and education. How that fleshes out is on the evangelism side, we still do large crusades, but we limit those primarily to refugee camps because we just feel like that's the most effective large-scale crusade ministry in Africa. But also on the evangelism front, we train local evangelists to take the Jesus film, which a lot of the listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with the Jesus film. It's just a theatrical version of the life of Jesus in the local language. So it's one of the best evangelism tools that I have ever seen in my life. So we train these local evangelists, and they take this solar-powered equipment with the Jesus film up into these remote villages, and they show the Jesus film, and we see hundreds of people get saved every year through that avenue. And then the second bucket, as I said, is the compassion arm. We're heavy on compassion. It's a lot of small things like giving away goats, chickens, mattresses, so people don't have to sleep on the ground. Clean water. We do water catch systems from the rainwater, water wells, anything that will lift people out of their poverty. One of the compassion projects, though, that we're really proud about is one called the Life Center. In Africa, a lot of times what happens is if a lady is abandoned, abused, or left by her husband, she usually is left with babies. And usually those women can't provide for themselves, and so they will turn to prostitution. But it's not the same kind of prostitution that we maybe think of in America. It's more just like a sex for food type situation. And once we noticed this, we realized that we needed to do something about that. So we bring these ladies into the Life Center, and we teach them skills like sewing. They learn how to make local soap and lotion out of goat's milk. And what we do is we give them not only discipleship, but we also give them the opportunity to learn business practice. And so when they graduate, it's a 12-month program. When they graduate from the program, they receive their own sewing machine and all the tools that they need to start their own business. And we're proud of this project because 100% of our graduates so far are self-sustainable. So the businesses they are creating are feeding their families, and it's working. And so that's the compassion arm. Also kind of bleeds from the compassion into the education a little bit. One of our major projects is child sponsorship. We started child sponsorship in 2019, and our sponsorship program, the basic level, is $39 a month. And that provides all that the child needs as far as basic necessities: food, healthcare, wellness checks, their school supplies, their school uniforms, and somebody from our team puts eyes on this child, about once a week. And so child sponsorship is really exploding in the ministry right now, but I think it's because it's easy to see the impact that's being made in a child's life. I mean, Dr. Ballin, if someone sponsors a child, like if someone goes to our website right now and sponsors a child, within 24 to 48 hours, that family is notified. And immediately that child receives a school uniform. We make sure that the family has all the food that they need to get started. And immediately this impact into a child's life, it shows immediately. So that's evangelism, compassion, and then the last arm, education. Our big project that we just finished phase 1 is Advocates Christian Academy. It was a $1.5 million project, one of the biggest project that we have ever done. We were scared to death, but we just knew that God had told us to do this. And asked me how many times I had raised $1.5 million before I built the school. Zero times. And so we were scared, but we knew that God had spoken to us. And so we stepped out and started to raise funds for this. We started to build, and we just finished phase 1 in October, started the school. We have 160 students at Advocates Christian Academy, and now we've gone on to build other things on the property. We're building mission team housing. It's almost completed. We're building a medical clinic, teacher housing for the local teachers and any from the U.S. that want to come and serve with us, either a semester or a lifetime. People just need to hear from God. I'm pretty sure it's a lifetime that they need to come and serve with us. But, it's just been incredible what the Lord has done, especially through Advocates Christian Academy, because we intentionally put the school in one of the most remote, poverty-stricken areas, not just in East Africa, but in Rwanda for sure. And we did that on purpose. We felt like that's exactly what God asked us to do. And the reason is because God gave us a clear, strong word that in order for a child to grow up to be a world changer,
Mm-hmm.
that should not be limited by where a child grows up or how much money they have.
Right.
And so we just feel like that we are responsible for making sure that these children in the villages, that many of their families live on $20 a month. And now these children have a top tier education opportunity. We have high speed internet ran straight to the school. So here are these children that don't have a single toy to their name. Mm-hmm. And they're able to go into our library and they're learning to do Google searches. I mean, so you can imagine how this is just expanding their minds and their worldview, And so Advocates Christian Academy is our big one. And then finally, we do train pastors as well. We train hundreds of pastors each year in pastor seminars. And now we started a new program where we're actually sending them to an accredited theological school in Rwanda. So we're trying to help the people come up out of their situations in everything we do.
Did you know that the Inspire Collective hosts a leadership blog? Not only can you hear from your favorite leaders on our podcast, you can read their insight from the office, over morning coffee, or during a lunch break. Don't miss out on the wealth of wisdom over at inspirecollective.com/blog. And while you're at it, send a blog to a fellow leader who needs some encouragement today. Wow. We really try to bring our guests in to really encourage those that are listening through the Inspire Collective podcast. And something that really resonated, you was talking about families living on $20 a week. And here in America, we're complaining about paying $4 a gallon for gas, where people can live on such a small amount of money. So I have to ask this question because I think it's one that we are all concerned about is obviously you're huge into this mission field, and COVID hit and everything seemed to stop the world. How did that affect people giving during the time of of the cycle of COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. We were nervous. I mean, at first we thought, man, how is this going to affect what we're doing? But what we learned, there's a couple of things that happened. Number one is that when we started the ministry, as many of the people listening probably understand, if you're in a mainline fellowship or denomination, when you start to do something different, there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to understand what you're doing. Right? They're going to think that you just are a guy that can't follow the rules or what have you. But there were a lot of people that really criticized how we were going about missions, because what we felt like is that the Rwandan people could do the work of the ministry if we just supplied the funding and the leadership and the accountability. Then you bring forward COVID. Missionaries were coming off the field. Missionaries couldn't go back to their fields. But with Advocates for Africa, our work never ceased. In fact, it increased because we were not in a position to where Jerod and Jerod Smith or our team here in the U.S. had to try to figure out how to travel back and forth, because the people doing the frontline work of the ministry are in Africa. So, but giving, to be honest with you, giving went up. We had 2020 and 2021 was two of the greatest years financially that we ever had, which I think is just a testament to God's faithfulness. That the Bible says he'll supply all of our need according to his riches and glory. And that's exactly what he's done. And so, man, right now our faith is high for finances. Our faith is high for what God wants to do. And we just want to trust him and keep stepping out and making big, bold steps of faith.
Right. So the first of the $1.5 million structures, I'm sure that the rest of them that will follow will be much more than that. So you're well on the roll for that.
Come on,
so, thank you guys for tuning in to the Inspire Collective podcast. We're sitting down today with Jerod Smith alongside his wife, Katina. They're the founders of the Advocates for Africa. Advocates for Africa are simply a nonprofit organization created to raise funds and awareness surrounding issues around Africa. With Jerod and Katina, they have been faithful serving this area for more than 20 years, and we're excited to have them as part of the Inspire podcast today as we interview them. So the next question I would have is that you have a variety of projects here, as we talked about the AFA, that people can actually donate directly to. And you just mentioned some of those. Some of those are school uniforms. putting roofs on places there in Rwanda, sponsoring a pastor, planting churches. The Jesus film, I love that concept that you just talked to us about with that. Giving a goat, that one sounds exciting to me. Giving a goat, the Life Center, Advocates for Christian Academy. So there's tons of ways. So do any of these resonate to your personal heart of saying, this is really what my heart is? I know that you have several different venues and avenues that you use, but does any of those really resonate closer to your heart than the other?
Yeah, I think that always in ministry, there's going to be a few projects that if you had to do away with all of them, you would never do away with these. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's by far number one will always be child sponsorship, because I've been there and I've watched the transformation that it makes children that in our sponsorship program. Dr. Bowen, we intentionally don't work in the capital cities. All of our work for all these years has always been in the remote areas. And we just see the drastic change that makes possible for these children to go to school. And so I think child sponsorship is always going to be the big one. And then closely second, of course, is going to be Advocates Christian Academy, because we just feel like that there's going to be a future president of Rwanda that will come through our school, or maybe the president of Kenya or Congo or someplace. And we have a responsibility to steward those children in a way that they are able to grow up to be that leader that God wants them to be. And so those are the two for me that will always be number one.
Wow, that's awesome. So which is the newest program that AFA currently offers?
Yeah, the biggest or the newest one is Advocates Christian Academy. And so, as I mentioned, we have the $39 a month for basic sponsorship. But if someone wanted to sponsor a child to go to Advocates Christian Academy, of course, $39 really only covers the basic necessities of life. Mm-hmm. But a school like Advocates Christian Academy, of course, we have overhead. I mean, anybody listening can understand that that's true. All of the children get a meal every single day at the school. We have 9 teachers now, a headmaster and security, and we have cleaning folks. And so all of this obviously builds into, now we've worked really, really hard to get the cost of the school down as far as we possibly can. It's $1,500 a year to send a child to Advocates Christian Academy. So that's $125 a month. But we've done some things to bring that cost down. And one of those is, of course, the $39 is applied to every child because they're all sponsored. So it leaves about an $86 difference per month. And so for $1,032, you can send a child to a very high-end education program for what it doesn't really seem like a lot of money, about $86 a month. And people can donate, and they can give toward that scholarship fund straight from our website. And that's the biggest thing that we have going on right now is trying to keep the funding going for Advocates Christian Academy.
Wow, $86 a month, and that's what we can spend that easily on a meal on a Friday night, and this will change a child's life forever. Like you said, maybe the president's going to come up out of the schools. That's exciting to hear. So hopefully some of our viewers are listening today. We're going to give you a way in just a few moments how to connect with Jerod, because I know you can feel his heart in what he's doing and how successful this is being. It's not something that's just kind of out there, something that has the ground already laid. So we're excited to hear about that, Jerod. So what about once somebody makes a donation, is there any kind of follow-up from you guys back to the sponsor to let them know what's happening? Is there a newsletter? How do they keep in touch with what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the greatest way to stay in touch with us, of course, is social media. That feels like a real-time update because we're constantly posting on social media, both Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms. And so I would encourage people to go there and follow us and like us. But then, of course, go to our website, just advocatesforafrica.org, and they can sign up for our monthly communication. And we would love to stay in touch with them that way. And, of course, they can call us. They can email us, all of that from the website. And we're very happy to communicate with our donors. Obviously, one of the things that we pride ourselves in is that we kind of say that we're the king of follow-up. Because, for example, Dr. Bowen, if you decide that you're going to sponsor a child, you sponsor a child today, within about a week, you're going to get a photo back of your child in a brand new uniform. If you decide that you want to give your child a goat, you're going to get a photo of the child with that goat, usually within about 24 to 48 hours. And so usually people are pretty impressed that we follow up with folks that quick.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to change gears just a little bit because I know you also have a book that's coming out. So tell me a little bit about the book, what we can expect in that book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Big, and you can get it on Amazon if you just go to Amazon and just put in the word Big by Jerod Smith. You can find that book. It's a book I wrote a few years ago. Having not been raised in church, I came into church and had a lot to learn, not just about my faith, but about church people. And so we put a lot of those things in the book. It also has my testimony in there and just my journey to faith. Just to keep it brief, I again, not raised in church. My parents were divorced by the time I was 3. Was physically, sexually abused as a child growing up, all the way through junior high. I was an angry kid, turned to drugs, alcohol, had no hope whatsoever. Met my wife, decided I needed to wake up and grow up a little bit, so I joined the Army. Spent 4 years in the Army. And when I got out of the Army, I just really, my life wasn't together. Our marriage was falling apart. And I had allowed the enemy to convince me that I needed it in my life. And so I knelt down in a hallway in Butte, Montana. We were up there working, my wife and I. And I knelt down, I put a pistol in my mouth and decided I was going to end my life. And at the moment that I was going to pull the trigger, I just felt, you can say it was audible. I don't know. Again, I wasn't raised in church, so there's not really an over spiritual bone in my body. I come from a business and a military background, but I knew that something had happened to me. I knew God had spoken to me, and all I heard God say was, "Where have you been?" And the next morning I got up, I drove all the way back to Oklahoma. I found my wife. We were separated at the time. And God began to just miraculously put our lives back together. And within 2 years, I was going to Bible school. And God had brought great mentors into my life. And from then on, we just never looked back. We just have always been, my wife and I both, we've been married 28 years now. And we've just always been so thankful that God saved us from the situation that we were in, that we just have never looked back. Man, I just want to serve Jesus every day of my life, and I want to go to heaven, and I want to take as many people as I can to get there. So the book has a lot of my testimony weaved in through there, our journey to advocates, and then just some key principles that we saw when we came into the church that it looked like to us that maybe the church was forgetting. Just simple things like that God's bigger than your sickness or disease, or that God is bigger than your financial trouble. And we just put together these biblical principles, and people have enjoyed the book. And so I would encourage people to go grab you a copy at Amazon.
Well, that's awesome. So if the enemy would have won, look at all the lives that would have missed out on the blessing that you have been able to do through Advocates for Africa. So we're grateful for that. So the book is Big by Jerod Smith. You guys want to go to Amazon and get you a copy of that. Let it inspire you and let his life inspire you for what God's done through him. So where can people actually connect with you and learn more about the AFA project and donate to the cause?
Yeah, easiest way is on the website. It's just advocatesforafrica.org. If you want to go quick there, you put a /donate on the front of it or on the end of it, and you can donate right there. We give people plenty of opportunities to get involved, and we want people to know that, look, we're not going to pressure you to get involved. We just think that believers have the ability to hear from God themselves. All we want to do is present the information. And if you go to our website, there's an opportunity to give there. Of course, you can go to YouTube, and we have a channel there that shows a lot of our recent work. You can check out what we're doing. But more than anything, Dr. Bowen, I would just encourage people to at least go to the website and sign up for our newsletter and see if they like what we're doing. And then they can make a decision over the next few months whether they want to partner with us.
Okay. I know we've given them a lot of information, so let me kind of recap. There's school uniforms, there's one-time donations, there's also roofs for Rwanda. Sponsoring a pastor, church planning, Jesus Film, Give a Goat, Life Center, and the Academy as well. And the list goes on, however you want to donate. we know that it'll be at a great cause. I know a lot of people want to donate, but they're not sure where, that the money's really being used for the right thing. And obviously we here at Inspire Collective know without a doubt that this is great seed and great soil. So if is there anything that you wish that the people knew about regarding Advocates for America, or the struggles maybe that Africa is experiencing as a whole right now?
Yeah, I think that the people in Africa, there's a big misconception, I think, sometimes from an American standpoint. They think that people in Africa somehow are living these drastically different lives than us. But what we have figured out is that people are people all over the world.
Yeah.
There is some people have a higher intelligence level than others throughout the world, and some don't. And it doesn't matter what country that you're in. And so I think the biggest thing that I would tell people is that I bring it back to our vision. Okay. We founded the ministry off the word advocate. If you think about what is an advocate is somebody who speaks on behalf of somebody who can't speak for themselves.
Right.
There are millions of people on the continent of Africa that need our help. And we need more people advocating for them so that they can take care of themselves, so they can spread the gospel themselves, so they can plant churches themselves. They're fully capable of doing those things, but we in the Western world are in a position to help them fund that. And I think it's just an encouragement to people to do something, get involved,
Yeah. Everybody just do something. If everybody just did a piece, right. So does AFA have any new or upcoming projects? I know that you're still in the midst of this academy and building and all that great stuff. You're coming to a conclusion of that. Is there anything that we haven't discussed today that maybe somebody needs to know about the Advocate program?
No, we're still trying to catch our breath from finishing phase 1 of Advocates Christian Academy. And so I think the biggest thing, our biggest initiative right now is just to keep the scholarship fund funded. We received a big grant last year that gave us 12 months of margin to be able to keep the school running, but we do have to stay ahead of that. And when people donate to the Advocates Christian Academy Scholarship Fund, I would just let them know that what they're doing is they're giving an opportunity for a child to make sure that they have an opportunity to grow up to be a world changer. And so that's our biggest initiative right now, is just the scholarship fund.
Yeah. And can you imagine the United States of being able to do that here for $86 a month?
Right.
That's amazing. It change somebody's life with that $86 donation.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
In closing today, with any closing words, wisdom, or anything that you would like to put out there for the Inspire podcast listeners today that's tuned in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the encouragement that I always like to give to anybody I meet is don't quit. Mm-hmm. There were 1,000 reasons why we could have and should have quit along the way in the last 8 years. And you can call it stubbornness or hard-headedness or whatever you want to call it. I just refused to quit. And the biggest reason, the reason that we didn't is because we knew that we had heard from God.
Right.
There was just this moment that we knew that God told us to start this organization and to do the work that we're doing in Africa. And I'm just not willing to move away from it till he tells me something different. And so in that time, as you mentioned before, we went from raising about $30,000 a year to over $1 million every year for the last several years. And it just continues to increase. So one of the things that has happened in that time period is, you get a little bit of gray in your beard, and people start assuming that you know something. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to these conferences and younger ministers are coming to me and asking me all these questions like I really, really am an expert in something. And my wife reminded me, she said, well, you're pretty decent at raising funds. And so as I started to explore that a little bit, I thought, maybe God would allow me to help other nonprofits and other missionaries to help raise their budgets. And so now we have started doing that. Of course, it's not my full-time thing. I'm only handling a few clients at a time, but I would just encourage people, if you're in a place where you're going to start a nonprofit, or you're in a nonprofit, or you're a missionary now, and you would like some coaching and some basic principles of fundraising, I would love to help, because I think that by working together, we can do more good for the kingdom of God than by working independently. And if I can help you raise $1 million for your nonprofit, that's a win for me too. that's a win for all of us, quite honestly.
Yeah. I don't think you realize how unique you are. I'm sure people are listening to the podcast today saying raising $1 million a year seems astronomical when most people are just trying to do something even smaller. But you have done it. You've laid the groundwork for that. And what a great way to partner with you to really be able to help people meet their dreams and goals as well in doing that. But Jerod, it has been a delight and a pleasure to have you here with us. And we thank you for what you're doing in Africa, that you're changing lives. And I know that it's going to be awesome one day to look back and see adults that has come through the academy. That's because of you've helped change. So that's awesome. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed the time. And man, I pray the blessing of God on everybody listening and an evangelistic spirit that makes them want to go out and share their faith.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We hope this conversation with Jerod Smith has left you feeling both motivated and inspired. Remember, you can connect with Jerod and the AFA organization by visiting advocatesforamerica.org. For more content, you can sign up for the Inspire Collective magazine and get your first-year subscription absolutely free. For more on this offer, visit us at inspirecollective.com. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week for more of the Inspire Collective podcast.